The cold night snow was falling slowly, covering the small human town like a blanket. The streets were empty. The air was cold enough to bite through skin. In that quiet darkness, a young alien girl walked alone. Her steps slow and unsteady. Her bare feet sank into the snow, leaving thin tracks behind her. Her clothes were worn and torn, not enough to keep out the icy wind. Her hair was silver, but it was dirty and tangled, and strands stuck to her cold face. Her eyes were tired, almost lifeless, and every breath came out in a small cloud of frost. She walked past closed shops and dark houses. Inside those houses, warm fires burned and families sat together. But no one opened the door for her. No one called her inside. They had seen her before in the town, and people whispered things about her. Some said she was dangerous. Others said she was cursed. No one knew her name, and no one wanted to know. So they turned away, pretending she was not there. The snow grew thicker, and the wind grew sharper. Her legs felt heavy, and her hands were stiff and red from the cold. She hugged herself tightly, trying to keep in what little warmth she had left. The hunger inside her was just as strong as the cold. It had been days since she had eaten more than scraps from trash bins. Every step made her dizzy. Her vision blurred, and she felt her knees weaken at the far edge of town, where the road turned into forest. There was one last house. It was small, made of wood, with smoke rising from its chimney. The windows glowed with a warm yellow light. She stopped and stared at it, feeling the pull of its warmth even from outside for a moment. She thought about going to the door and knocking, but fear gripped her. She had knocked on doors before, and every time she had been told to leave, some had shouted at her. Some had thrown things. She had learned that asking for help often brought more pain. She took a step back, ready to turn away, but then a wave of weakness hit her, and her legs gave out. She fell forward into the snow, her hands sinking deep into the cold. Her breathing was slow now, her body shaking. She closed her eyes, thinking maybe this was the end. The snow would cover her, and no one would ever know her story. Inside the house, a man sat by the fire, reading an old book. His name was Ethan, a quiet man who lived alone. The sound of the wind outside was normal to him. But then he heard something else, a faint, uneven knock on the door. He frowned, putting his book down. No one came here this late at night, especially in this weather. He walked to the door and opened it. At first, all he saw was snow falling under the porch light. Then he looked down and saw her. She was lying on her side, her skin pale blue, her lips trembling. Her hair clung to her face, and her eyes were closed. For a second, Ethan froze. She was clearly not human. And that meant trouble at least. That's what everyone said, but trouble or not, she looked like she would die right there if he did nothing. He stepped outside, the cold hitting him instantly. He bent down and gently lifted her, feeling how light she was. She didn't fight, didn't even open her eyes. Her body was so cold it scared him. He carried her inside, closing the door against the wind. The warmth of the fire filled the room. He placed her on the couch, quickly wrapping her in a thick blanket. Her breathing was shallow, and her hands were like ice. Ethan crouched down, trying to wake her. Her eyelids moved slowly, and she looked at him with fear. "I'll leave," she whispered weakly. "Just don't hurt me." Her voice was soft, broken, and full of mistrust. Ethan shook his head. "You're safe here," he said simply. For a moment, she looked at him like she didn't believe him. Then her eyes closed again, her body relaxing slightly in the warmth. Outside, the snow kept falling, but far in the darkness beyond the house, someone else was there. A shadow moved between the trees, watching the little cabin. The cold night was not as empty as it seemed. The stranger at the door. The fire crackled softly in the small cabin. Ethan stood near the couch, watching the alien girl's breathing slowly become steadier. Her blanket rose and fell in a weak rhythm, but she still looked fragile. Her skin had a strange faint glow under the firelight. Not bright, but enough to make him certain she was not human. He knew what that meant. If anyone in town found out she was here, there would be questions, accusations, maybe even threats. But he couldn't ignore what he had seen outside. She would have died in the snow. He poured a cup of warm water and set it on the small table near her. Then he pulled a chair closer to the fire, sitting with his hands clasped. It had been years since someone had been inside this house. Ethan preferred quiet. Preferred to be left alone. But tonight was different. Now there was a stranger here, one who didn't belong, and yet, somehow, he couldn't bring himself to send her away. The wind howled against the windows. The cabin creaked as the storm pushed against it. She stirred under the blanket, her silver hair shifting across her face, her eyes opened slightly large, bright, and filled with a mix of fear and confusion. For a moment, she seemed ready to bolt. Ethan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said quietly. "No one is going to hurt you here." She stared at him, breathing faster. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why help me?" Ethan didn't have an answer ready. He could have said it was the right thing to do. He could have said it was because no one else would. But instead, he only replied, "Because you need it." Help. Something in her gaze softened. She pulled the blanket tighter, looking around the room like she was memorizing every corner. Then, almost reluctantly, she took the cup of water and sipped. Her hands trembled so much that a drop slid down her chin. Ethan handed her a cloth, and she hesitated before taking it. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My name is Lyra." Ethan nodded. "Ethan," he replied simply. There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of the fire. But then her eyes flicked toward the window. The change was subtle, but Ethan noticed someone out there. He asked. She didn't answer, only pulled the blanket even closer. Her silence said enough. Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out into the snow. Nothing moved except the falling flakes. But the forest beyond the fence was dark too. Dark. He could almost feel the weight of unseen eyes. He locked the door and added more wood to the fire. "You should rest," he told her. "You're safe for tonight." Lyra didn't argue. But she didn't relax either. Her eyes kept darting to the shadows outside, as if she expected them to come alive. As the night went on, Ethan tried to read again, but every now and then, he caught her watching him, not with trust at least, not yet, but with curiosity. It was as if she was trying to figure out why a human would open his door to her. Outside, the snow buried the road, and the storm grew stronger. Somewhere beyond the trees, unseen shapes shifted in the dark. The stranger at the door had brought more than just herself into Ethan's home. She had brought danger, and it was getting closer. The first meal morning came slowly, hidden behind heavy clouds that turned the sky a dull gray. The storm had left a thick layer of snow outside, covering everything in silence. Ethan moved quietly around the small kitchen, his boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. He was careful not to wake Lyra, who still lay curled up on the couch under the blanket. She hadn't moved much during the night, except for the moments when she flinched in her sleep. Whatever dreams she had, they didn't seem peaceful. Ethan opened a jar of dried vegetables and poured them into a pot. The water inside began to boil slowly, releasing the smell of warm soup into the room. He found some bread, old, but still good enough, and set it near the fire to soften. When the scent reached Lyra, her eyelids fluttered open. She blinked a few times, her silver hair falling over her face. For a moment, she seemed unsure where she was, her body tense. Then she saw Ethan standing at the stove. And some of that tension faded. "Hungry?" he asked, his voice calm. She hesitated, biting her lip. Her pride and fear were fighting her hunger, but her empty stomach answered for her. A low sound rumbling in the quiet room. Ethan placed a wooden bowl on the table and ladled steaming Soup into it, he added the bread, letting it soak. Then he stepped back, giving her space. Lyra pushed the blanket aside and sat up slowly. Her movements were careful, like a wild animal, unsure if it was safe to come closer. She walked to the table, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. She looked at the bowl as if it might disappear. If she wasn't careful, then she picked up the spoon, her hand shaking slightly. The first sip made her paws heat spreading through her cold body. She took another, then another. Eating faster now, Ethan didn't say anything. He just watched her in silence. Noticing the way she kept glancing toward the window between bites. When she finished, she pushed the bowl away. Her voice was soft. "Thank you." It sounded like... The words were strange on her tongue, as if she didn't use them often. He nodded. "You can rest here until you're stronger." Her eyes widened slightly, as if she couldn't believe he meant it. Then she shook her head. "I can't stay," she whispered. "They'll find me." Ethan leaned forward. "Who?" But she didn't answer. She stared into the fire instead. Her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket she had pulled back over herself. The unease in the room grew heavier. Ethan had heard rumors about alien trackers who hunted. Their own kind. If they wanted her, it meant trouble. He glanced at the window again, and for a second, he thought he saw movement among the trees, a dark shape shifting in the white snow. When he looked again, it was gone. Lyra noticed his gaze. "They're already close," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. He didn't know why yet. But he had a feeling helping her wasn't going to be as simple as giving her food and shelter. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering tracks, hiding footsteps. But somewhere beyond the edge of the forest, something was waiting. The past. She hit the fire had burned low, its glow casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Lyra sat close to it, her knees pulled up under the blanket, her silver hair falling like a curtain over her face. Ethan had given her fresh socks and a thick sweater, but she still looked cold, though he wasn't sure if it was the winter air or the memories she carried. He could tell there were things she wasn't saying. Every time he asked where she had come from, she would look away, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, Ethan sat across from her, his elbows resting on his knees. "You said they'll find you," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Who are they?" Lyra's fingers tightened around the blanket. "They're hunters," she whispered. "Not for animals. For people." Ethan frowned. "Why would they be after you?" Her eyes flicked up to meet his for a brief second, then dropped again. "They say I did something I didn't," she murmured. "They say I betrayed my own tribe." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan leaned back, trying to make sense of it. She spoke slowly, like each sentence was a stone she had to lift. "My family was important. Not rich, but respected," she said. "One day, something went wrong, someone was killed. Someone important to the leaders." She swallowed hard. "They said it was me." Ethan could see the pain in her face, the way her eyes shone but didn't let tears fall. "They didn't ask me what happened. They didn't care," she continued. "They just wanted someone to blame, so they cast you out." Ethan asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "They stripped my name from the records. They broke the seal that marked me as one of them. And they left me in the wastelands." She paused, her voice low now. "I thought I could hide in another settlement. But the hunters, they always find me." Her gaze turned toward the window, where snow still drifted down from the gray sky. "I don't know why they follow me this far. Maybe they want to make an example out of me." Ethan stayed silent for a moment. He didn't know much about alien customs, but he understood exile. It was a slow kind of death, being left alone in a world that didn't want you. "What happens if they catch you?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer right away when she finally spoke. Her voice was barely a breath. "They don't take prisoners." The room felt colder, even with the fire burning. Ethan knew now why she kept looking over her shoulder, why she was ready to run at any moment. But there was something else, something she wasn't saying yet. He could see it in her eyes, a secret even deeper than the one she had just told. Before he could ask more, a sound came from outside. It was faint, but sharp like boots crunching. In snow, Lyra's head snapped toward the door, her body tensing like a trapped animal. "They've found me," she whispered. Ethan stood, his instincts sharp now. "Stay here," he told her. But she shook her head quickly. "They won't." "Stop," she said, her voice trembling. "They'll come through the door, and when they do, they'll kill you too." The crackle of the fire was the only sound for a moment. Then, from the dark edge of the forest, a shadow moved closer. The past Lyra had tried to hide was no longer behind her, was standing outside in the snow. The threat arrives, the snow outside had stopped falling. But the air was still sharp and cold. The forest stood silent. Dark shapes of trees rising against the pale sky. Ethan stepped to the window, his eyes scanning the edge of the woods. That's when he saw them, 3 tall figures moving slowly through the snow. Their steps heavy but steady. They weren't hiding, they wanted to be seen. Their shapes became clearer as they came closer. They were alien, taller than any human. Their armor dark and polished, marked with symbols Ethan didn't understand. Each carried a weapon strapped to their side, long and curved, glowing faintly with a cold blue light. Their faces were covered by half masks, but their eyes shone through, sharp and unblinking. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "It's them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The hunters?" Ethan looked back at her, her blanket clutched tightly around her shoulders. "They can't take you," he said firmly. Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. You stand in their way. They will kill you without hesitation." But Ethan had already moved to the door. When the hunters reached the fence line, they stopped in perfect unison. The one in the middle stepped forward. His voice deep and cold. "Human," he called out. "You have something that belongs to us." Ethan kept his voice steady. "She's not yours." The hunter tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "She is marked," he said. "She carries a sentence, and it must be carried out." Ethan took a step closer to the porch railing, his hands resting on the wood. "Then your sentence is wrong," he replied. The hunter's eyes narrowed, the faint light from his weapon reflecting in them. "You protect her. You share her fate," he said slowly. Behind him, the other 2 shifted, their hands brushing over their weapons. Lyra was at the doorway now. "Fear in her eyes, please," she whispered to Ethan. "Let me go with them. They'll leave you alone." Ethan turned to her, his voice calm but unyielding. "No," he said. "No one gets taken from my home." The middle hunter's expression hardened. "Then you have chosen death," he said. They turned and began walking back toward the trees, but they're slow. Deliberate pace didn't feel like retreat. It felt like a promise. Ethan closed the door and locked it. His mind was already racing. They would be back, and they would come ready for a fight. Lyra stood in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself. "You don't know what you've done," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. "Then tell me," he said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They never fail." Outside, the shadows of the hunters disappeared into the forest. The snow lay untouched again. But the danger had not passed. It was only waiting for nightfall. The fight in the snow night fell quickly. The pale light of day swallowed by a sky thick with clouds. The forest beyond the cabin became a wall of black. Silent and heavy, Ethan moved quietly through the house, checking the windows, the locks, the places where the hunters might try to enter. Lyra sat near the fire, but her eyes never left the door. Every crackle of the wood made her flinch. She had told Ethan more about the hunters. They never came twice for someone unless they were certain they would succeed the second time. That meant tonight, Ethan pulled out a heavy box from under his bed. Inside were tools, rope, and a few weapons. He had hunted wolves before, but this was different. These were not animals, they were trained killers. He strung wire traps between the trees near the fence, buried snares in the snow where footsteps might land. The cold bit at his hands, but he worked quickly. Lyra watched from the doorway, her breath a white mist in the air. "You're not going to win against them," she said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. "I don't need to win," he replied. "I just need to make them leave." Hours passed, and the silence outside deepened until it felt unnatural. Then, from somewhere in the dark, came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching the snow. Lyra's eyes widened. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan stepped to the side of the door, his knife in hand, his breath steady. The first shadow passed between the trees. The faint blue glow of a weapon cutting through the dark. Another shadow followed. Then the third. They were spread out, moving like predators. A sudden snap echoed through the night. One of Ethan's wire traps had caught a leg. The hunter didn't fall, but the delay made him glance down, and that was when Ethan moved. He leaped from the porch. The snow crunching under his boots, his shoulders slammed into the nearest hunter, driving him back into a tree. The alien snarled, swinging a glowing blade, but Ethan ducked, the weapon slicing through the cold air just above his head. The second hunter charged toward the cabin. Lyra stood frozen for a moment. Then her hands moved, energy sparked from her fingertips. A sudden burst of light flared, blinding the hunter long enough for Ethan to shove him into a buried snare. The rope tightened around his legs, pulling him down into the snow. The third hunter didn't slow. He came straight at Ethan with frightening speed. Ethan blocked the strike with his knife, the impact sending a sharp jolt up his arm. Snow sprayed into the air as they struggled. The hunter's strength was overwhelming. But Ethan fought with everything he had from the corner of his eye. He saw Lyra raise her hands again. This time, the air around her shimmered with a faint blue glow. A shockwave burst outward, knocking the hunter back several steps for a moment. The night was filled with heavy breathing and the hiss of disturbed snow. The hunters regrouped, their eyes burning with anger, but they didn't rush again. They stood still, staring at Ethan and Lyra, as if weighing the cost. Then, without a word, they stepped back into the shadows of the forest. Their blue lights faded until the trees swallowed them completely. Ethan stayed still, listening. Only when the wind returned did he lower his knife. Lyra was shaking, her hands still glowing faintly. "You fought for me," she said, her voice unsteady. Ethan looked at her, snow clinging to his hair and coat. "You're not alone anymore," he replied. A new home. The cabin was quiet again, the fire burning low but steady. Snow tapped softly against the windows. Carried by a gentle wind, Ethan set his knife on the table and removed his coat, the heat from the fire slowly chasing away the cold. In his bones, Lyra sat on the couch, her silver hair still damp from melted snow, her hands wrapped around a mug of warm tea. She stared into the steam as if trying to believe she was really here, safe. For a long moment, neither spoke. The danger felt distant now, but not gone. They both knew the hunters might return one day, yet for tonight, the cabin felt like a shield. Against the outside world, Ethan sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "You can stay as long as you want," he said, his voice calm. Lyra blinked, her eyes lifting to meet his. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Then maybe it's about time someone did." The firelight danced across the walls. Lyra looked around the small cabin at the shelves of books, the tools on the walls, the warm blankets. It wasn't much compared to the home she had once known, but it felt real. It felt like a place where she could belong. She sipped her tea slowly when she spoke again. Her voice carried a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You risked your life for me?" "You didn't even know me," Ethan shrugged. "Doesn't matter," he said. "You needed someone, and I was here." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the tracks of the hunters until the night looked untouched, somewhere deep inside. Lyra felt a weight she had carried for years begin to lift. She had been homeless, broken, and alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Now, for the first time in years, she let herself believe she might have a future. She set her mug aside and leaned back into the couch. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the snow glowed faintly in the moonlight. This place wasn't just a shelter from the cold, it was the start of something new. She turned her gaze back to Ethan, her voice quiet but steady. "Then this. This is my home now." Ethan gave a small nod, and for the first time that night, a real smile touched his face. The fire crackled warmly. The storm outside no longer a threat. And in that small wooden cabin at the edge of the world, two strangers who had nothing found something worth keeping.